The Namu was taken completely by surprise when, instead of punching back like he always did, All Might caught his enormous fist with both hands and didn't let go. Instead, he started rotating fast, increasing the speed until both he and the Namu appeared like an indistinguishable blur. Oklahoma Smash.
The fat Nomu's body smashed violently against the Ua barrier, its blood and organs splattering all over the place.
But All Might couldn't go for the finishing blow, and had to run away because the hair Namu turned its hair-like appendage into sharp spears and started chasing him around.
At that moment, Izuku burst from the cloud of smoke with such speed that a sonic boom was left in his wake.
Jin. One for all foe. 140%. Texas Smash.
It was the strongest attack he had thrown in his entire life. The FA Jin-empowered Texas Smash Punch leveled the woods and smashed the hair Nomu's head and body into a paste of gore and blood, obliterating it.
At first, Izuku was ecstatic at having destroyed the Namu in one punch, but when his eyes fell on the devastated scenery ahead of him, a look of horror appeared on his face.
His FA Jin Texas Smash didn't just kill the Nomu and flatten the land. Just from a quick glance around, it could be seen that roughly 30 or 40 villains had been turned into mincemeat as well.
The realization that his great power had led to such a massacre made the boy instantly bend over and throw up, unable to stomach his revulsion.
That moment of weakness was a grave mistake. When he started throwing up, the laser Nomu, who had gotten up from the ground by then and regenerated, aimed its open hand at him and slowly rotated it. Izuku's danger sense flared, but he was unable to react in time when the space started twisting around his right arm. He screamed in agony as the Nomu used its spatial distortion quirk to twist and break his right arm beyond recovery. Midoriya Shonen. All Might shouted and cocked his fist back before throwing a wide area attack, Nebraska Smash.
A vortex of air burst from the power of his punch, and swept up in the air the three remaining Namu, and many of the corpses of the villains below, creating a macabre tornado of death. He wanted to rush to Izuku and check up on him, but it looked like Gigantamakia got up to his feet at that moment too, and was preparing to launch another attack. If he punches the UA barrier one or two more times, he'll break through. All Might thought in anxiety.
Too many lives were at stake. With Gigantomashia's ability to tunnel through the ground, the evacuating students won't be safe from his pursuit. Don't worry, Sensei, we got this. Kirishima yelled. You can go all out against Nomu. Leave Gigantomashia to us, Todoroki said too, and, at that moment, he stomped his foot on the ground, creating a massive wall of ice. It was so large and thick that it even dwarfed the Ua barrier and Gigantomashia too.
All Might wanted to put his trust in them, but the sight of Gigantomachia smashing away Todoroki's ice, as if it were brittle glass, didn't fill him with confidence.
Dark Shadow. Ragnarok, Tokiyami shouted, and the shadowy being coming from his gut grew to immense proportions despite the fact that it was still light outside. It smashed headfirst into Gigantomashia's chest, pushing him nearly 30 meters away from the Ua barrier.
Sorry, everyone. And thank you. I'll be counting on you, said All Might. He had no other choice but to trust them with this. After all, quite a few of the students from 3A were even stronger than some professional heroes, and Izuku couldn't win against the high-end Namu all by himself. Not after one of his arms had been compromised.
Saying those words, he rushed at Izuku, who was standing up on shaky legs. His face was wet with sweat from the unimaginable pain. It wasn't the first time he broke his hand, but it had never been twisted like a pretzel before. Don't worry, All Might, Izuku said through gritted teeth as he watched the Nomu stand up to their feet unharmed after the tornado generated by All Might's punch died down. I can still fight. I won't hold you back.
All Might didn't bother trying to convince him otherwise. He was a pro hero, so he understood Izuku's resolve. They couldn't afford to give up now. They couldn't allow the villains to pass through until everyone evacuated. We just have to hold on until reinforcements arrive, All Might tried to encourage him. But Izuku shook his head and smiled bitterly. If we were to get any reinforcements, they would be here by now. I think this isn't the only place the villains attack.
Izuku's guess wasn't off the mark. The Meta Liberation Army had over 100,000 members before All for One took command of it. Their numbers were even larger now. With such immense manpower at his beck and call, AFO launched a series of coordinated attacks on all the medium and major hero agencies across the entirety of Japan. The reason why nobody was answering Uehai's distress calls was that all the pro-heroes were caught in a fight against numerically superior villains in their own home cities.
2 teams of villains were carefully selected in order to accomplish tasks that were significantly more difficult. The first team was sent to Uehai to kill All Might and the rest of the pro-heroes and fledgling heroes among the students before razing the whole school to the ground. As for the second team, it accompanied him to Tokyo.
Unlike the bitter battle taking place at Uehai, All for One and the elites accompanying him didn't struggle in the least.
Their first destination was the National Diet Building. Once the villains killed all the security staff who tried to stop their advance, they surrounded the Parliament building from all sides, making it impossible for any of the politicians inside to escape. Turning towards his followers, All for One spoke.
We are finally here, in front of this nest of vipers. Our status as pariahs, the injustice dealt to us, and this society that labels us as villains and negates our rights, all these are their doing. They are the ones who shaped our country into this dystopian present.
Today is the start of a new era. We will eliminate this cancer from society and create a new world.
Today we take over Japan.
At the end of his little speech, the thousands of villains accompanying him burst into loud cheers and roars. All for One sat back and smiled as he watched from a distance how the villains stormed the National Diet Building. Wails and death cries filled the sky as the villains ruthlessly massacred everyone present in the building at that moment.
AFO could have ended it all instantly and painlessly with the use of his air cannon quirk. He could have turned the building and everyone inside into mincemeat with one attack. But what was the fun in that? No, he was going to revel in their pain and suffering. Today, he was going to become the ruler of Japan, so he wanted to enjoy the full experience thoroughly.
Nearly 20 minutes later, not a living soul could be found inside the building, except for AFO's army of villains. With the first objective of their visit to Tokyo accomplished, AFO took his place in front of the army and led the way to the Hero Public Safety Commission's headquarters. Once I cut the head of the snake, the rest will fall too.
With the HPSC eliminated, the pro-heroes would be like a herd of sheep without a shepherd. They would become easy pickings for the wolves, they would be ripped to shreds. Asterism back to Uehai asterism. The 3B class and their teachers were fighting off the flying Nomu and the flying type villains. The 3A class and some teachers were doing their best to hold back Gigantomashi, and All Might and Midoriya Izuku were fighting a bitter battle against the 3 high-end Nomu. Outside the UA campus, on the side opposite of where Izuku and All Might were fighting the Nomu, Naruto himself was locked in a high-speed battle against the Nomu Shigaraki and 2 other high-end Nomu. Although Shigaraki and Hood appeared to be at odds at first, once Hood reminded Shigaraki that their master wanted them to work together in order to kill Naruto, the two of them stopped arguing.
Naruto didn't wait for them to attack him and made the first move. The ground under his feet crumbled as he suddenly broke the sound barrier, launching himself straight at Shigaraki.
Despite his inhuman speed, Shigaraki reacted in time and raised both his hands to meet his charge, activating his decay. But Naruto slid on the ground, avoiding his lunging hands, and swept him off his feet with his fox tails.
Kurama, I'm counting on you, Naruto shouted as he threw his adamantine sealing chains at the falling Shigaraki. Seeing as he was using his chains to attack, he would not be able to defend his unprotected back from Hood, who grew 5 immense arms and threw a heavy barrage at him. Shigaraki was just a second away from getting captured by the chains when a massive air explosion burst from his back and propelled him over 100 meters in the air.
Shit, he has AFO's quirk too. Naruto cursed under his breath when he recognized AFO's air cannon from when he was attacked 2 years ago at the training camp.
At the same time, Kyuubi came out of his shirt and met Hood's barrage of attacks with his own claws, slicing through Namu's limbs like a hot knife through butter.
Air cannon, Shigaraki screamed, and Naruto turned into a blur as he used his great speed to escape the radius of the attack.
His run came to an abrupt stop, and he raised 2 of his foxtails to block the female Namu's attack, who appeared at his side like a ghost and kicked with her entire strength.
His tails were powerful and tough enough to withstand her monstrous strength, but he wasn't prepared for her entire leg to suddenly inflate and blow up. The explosion sent him flying through the air, and several cuts appeared on his forearms and legs as the pieces of flesh that exploded from the female Nomu's leg turned into blade-like projectiles.
His adamantine ceiling chains quickly formed a sphere of light around him, just a split second before Hood smashed 10 gigantic fists into him. Hood lost control over all of his 10 artificial arms when they touched the golden sphere of light, and Naruto used that opening to cancel the protective dome of light and throw 8 kunai at him. "You missed!" "Ha ha!" came Hood's mocking laughter, when not even one of the 8 kunai managed to hit him. His laughter stopped, and he tilted his head in confusion when his body was suddenly tied up by a metallic wire from head to toe. He couldn't understand when and how that happened. The Namu had yet to get over his confusion when Naruto suddenly appeared in front of him with a burst of speed and smashed his foot into his chin. As Hood was flung up into the air, Naruto jumped after him and seemingly defied gravity as he slammed a series of brutal kicks into Namu's gut, sending him flying even higher into the air. Despite the vicious hits, Hood was relatively unharmed, thanks to his inhuman constitution. Nonetheless, he wouldn't allow the boy to get any hits on him anymore. His shoulder-mounted jet's quirk activated and propelled him further upwards, away from Naruto's kicking range. Then, his muscles bulged, and he let out a scream as he broke free of the metallic wire that had immobilized his body. However, taking his eyes off Naruto for even a split second had been the biggest mistake he could have made. The moment Hood lost sight of Naruto while straining to break out the metallic wire, the blonde launched his adamantine ceiling chains at him. The high-end Namu had just gotten out of his restraints when he was ensnared again, this time by 4 unbreakable golden chains.
What is this? Nomu said in a mixture of panic and confusion as his shoulder-mounted jets stopped functioning and started falling down to the ground.
"Why, my quirks? Not working?" Hood screamed, but Naruto didn't answer him. Instead, he tightened his chains on Namu and stuck his body close to him before pulling hard to the side.
The 2 of them started rotating at an incredible speed as they plunged towards the ground head-first from a height of over 30 meters in the air. They looked as if they had transformed into a gigantic drill. It was Rock Lee's reverse lotus taijutsu move from Naruto's previous life.
A massive crater appeared in the ground, and a thick cloud of dirt and dust filled the air, making it impossible for anything to be seen for a while. Anxious to see what had just happened, Shigaraki activated his air cannon and blew all the dust and dirt away. Both he and the female Namu were stupefied at the sight in front of their eyes. The bottom of the crater was splattered with an obscene amount of blood and gore, all of it belonging to their fellow Namu. Hood.
With the adamantine ceiling chains sealing away Hood's toughness and super regeneration, Naruto's reverse lotus had been devastating. Hood became unrecognizable. His entire body was ruptured and crushed into a paste of blood and fleshy remains.
Naruto wiped the blood staining his face with the sleeve of his jacket before stepping out of the crater with a feral look in his now crimson-red, slit eyes. Who is next? His inhuman demonic voice sent chills down Shigaraki's and female Namu's spines. For the first time since they were created, the 2 Namu felt fear. Chapter 42. Titan's Fall. Naruto wiped the blood staining his face with the sleeve of his jacket before stepping out of the crater with a feral look in his now crimson-red, slit eyes. Who is next? His inhuman demonic voice sent chills down Shigaraki's and female Namu's spines. For the first time since they were created, the two Nomu felt fear.
But then, anger took over fear, and Nomu Shigaraki let out a scream. Aiming his hands at Naruto, he fired two enormous blasts of pressurized air. An entire section of the woods was leveled, and a deafening sound like that of nails scratching against a blackboard was heard when they impacted the Ua barrier.
Alas, no matter how powerful an attack was, it amounted to nothing if it didn't hit its intended target. Naruto had easily avoided his telegraphed attack. Not only did he miss Naruto, but his air cannon ended up reaping the lives of another few dozen villains, who were supposed to be on Shigaraki's side.
At that point, most of the no-name villains started running away from the battlefield as if the devil was on their tail. They were not retarded. They realized that they were little more than cannon fodder in a battle between monsters like the Nomu, Gigantomachia, All Might, and Vanguard. Merely a split second after Shigaraki fired his air cannon quirk, a glint of gold light shone in the corner of his vision as four spear-tipped golden chains struck at his right side like vipers. Fuck. He stuttered out a curse, but, thankfully, right as the chains were about to impale him, the female Nomu threw a large tree trunk into the midsection of the chains, bending them and thus changing their trajectory at the very last moment, making them miss. Shigaraki didn't miss the opportunity that female Nomu created for him, and 8 red and black tendrils came out of his fingers, firing back at Naruto. It was one of All for One's favorite quirks, Rivet Stab. Naruto caught the rivet tendrils that he could with his bare hands, shattering them like glass, and used his 5 fox tails to block the ones that he couldn't catch. His fox tails weren't just for show. They were so tough and durable that the rivet tendrils couldn't even pierce through their inexplicably soft-looking fur.
Female. Namu almost broke the sound barrier as she charged at Naruto and threw another kick with her entire strength. Due to his adamantine ceiling chains being extended over a long distance, and due to Shigaraki's rivet stab occupying his arms and tails, Naruto was unable to defend himself against her.
But he wasn't alone. Female Nomu was surprised as a crimson-red fox-like creature came out of his shirt and caught her kick effortlessly. It was Kurama. Opening his maws wide, he sank his fangs into her leg, ripping it to shreds, or at least that had been the plan. Kurama didn't feel the sensation of his teeth tearing into flesh because female Nomu's body turned into a puddle of water and slithered out of his grasp with her liquefying quirk.
Their battle came to an unexpected pause when a massive explosion burst from the other side of the battlefield, like a volcano. It was so powerful that he could feel the heat even from such a huge distance away.
While Naruto, Izuku, and All Might were fighting against the high-end Nomu, 3B class students had mostly finished their fights with the flying-type villains and Nomu and were in the process of evacuating. Meanwhile, some of the teachers came to aid the other zones of the battlefield. Although Gaara's sand landslide managed to sweep Gigantomachia a second time off his feet, the giant stood up again much faster than the first time and punched at Gaara with a roar.
A gigantic wall of ice rose in front of Gaara, courtesy of Todoroki, but Makia's fists smashed through it effortlessly. Gaara also created a thick wall of sand, and right after him, Cementos also erected a large rampart. Fortunately, with the sand acting as a sort of cushioning layer, Cementos' concrete wall managed to withstand, just barely, the giant's punch, saving Gaara from certain death.
Dark Shadow, shouted Tokiyami as he took a page out of Gaara's book and tried to make Makia lose its footing by sweeping his leg. This isn't working. We have to knock him out somehow, said Tokiyami when he saw that Makia didn't easily lose his balance. While the heavy hitters were holding back Gigantomachia, Present Mike's loud voice rang in everyone's ears. 3A class, listen to me carefully. We are going to retreat. Most of the students and non-combat teachers have already evacuated. The 3B class is evacuating now too. Other than the names I'm going to mention now, everyone else will follow me to the shelter. Uzumaki Naruto, Izuku Midoriya, Shoto Todoroki, Fumikage Tokiyami, Sabaku Gaara. The 5 of you can stay behind and continue fighting if you so desire. But everyone else has to retreat. Now, this is not up for debate. Present Mike screamed when he saw quite a few of them acting rebellious. Kirishima, Kaminari, and Mina were particularly dissatisfied with the situation, but Present Mike's scream made them swallow their complaints, and they followed everyone else as they ran to the shelter. Damn it, it's because we're too weak, Kirishima said angrily.
It wasn't lost on them how Present Mike allowed only the strongest 5 students in the class to stay behind, to hold Namu and Gigantomachia back.
They're treating us like dead weight. Shit, Kaminari also cussed. The worst thing was that they couldn't contradict Present Mike's words. They couldn't imagine how they would be able to fight against Gigantomachia. That villain was simply in another league altogether. As for the high-end Nomu outside the UA barrier, their eyes could barely even keep up with their movements. They knew that they would most likely get killed in seconds if they were to get involved in that fight. Alas, during such dire moments, Present Mike couldn't afford to care about their hurt feelings. It was his responsibility as their teacher and as a pro-hero to ensure their safety. With the flying-type Nomu and villains taken care of, Eraserhead ran as fast as he could towards the outer rim of UA High's campus and climbed the steel ladder leading to the top of the UA barrier.
Aizawa was rarely envious of other people's quirks, but in such a critical moment, he couldn't help feeling frustrated with his lack of superhuman abilities. I need to get there as soon as possible. Unfortunately, his physical abilities weren't that much higher compared to a well-trained quirkless person. Climbing up a ladder over 20 meters tall couldn't be done in a matter of seconds. Suddenly, a gunshot was heard, and he cried out in pain when a bullet passed through his hand, leaving a bloody hole in it. The suddenness of the pain made him lose his hold on the ladder, and he fell off from a height of nearly 7 meters.
Despite the painful fall, he was fortunate enough not to get injured. He stood up as quickly as he could, just in time to see one of his colleagues step from behind a nearby building. Wearing a cowboy hat, a gas mask, a red cloak, and carrying 2 pistols in his hands, his identity was unmistakable.
"Snipe! What's the meaning of this?" shouted Eraserhead, all the while wrapping his bleeding hand with a piece of his clothing. "Are you siding with the villains? Are you betraying us?" When Snipe aimed his pistols at him instead of replying, Aizawa activated his erasure quirk. Under his disbelieving eyes, Snipe's body seemed to melt, and his clothes and skin fell off like a gelatinous goo, revealing the almost naked body of a blonde girl in her late teens.
"Oops, I was caught," said the girl with a large grin.
"Who are you? Where is the real Snipe?" "Hey! What do you mean? He's right in front of you," she said, giggling. "So you killed him, huh?" "He's not dead. He lives through me. We are one and the same."
Eraserhead frowned, not feeling in the mood to deal with an insane killer's mad rambling. Despite his injured hand, he charged at her, unafraid in the least. But, to his surprise, the girl didn't back off. Pulling a knife out of nowhere, she lunged at him too and slashed wildly at his neck. Aizawa crouched under the slash of her knife and then stood up fast, smashing his head into her chin.
The girl stumbled back in pain, the strength of his headbutt making her see white for a moment. He didn't give her any time to recover and swung his fist at her, slamming his punch into her temple. Already dizzy from the headbutt, the girl was knocked out cold by his second strike.
Aizawa looked at her for 2 more seconds before turning around and rushing back to the ladder. But he only managed to make 3 more steps before a sharp knife was stabbed into his back. The blonde girl hadn't been knocked out, she had been playing possum all along. Thanks to her ability to make her presence disappear, Eraserhead didn't suspect that she might still be conscious and turned his back to her, intent on going to All Might's help as soon as possible.
Eraserhead only felt a sharp spike of pain as the girl removed her blade from his back and let him collapse to the ground like a sack of potatoes.
I don't like you. I'd rather not drink your blood, but I'll make good use of your quirk, she said as she stuck her tongue out, licking the blood off her knife's blade.
Eraserhead only managed to see the girl transforming into a perfect copy of himself before his eyes closed against his will, and he fell unconscious. At the same time, outside the UA barrier, Cementos, Gaara, Todoroki and Tokoyami were fighting a bitter battle against Gigantomachia. However, thanks to Cementos' arrival, the situation wasn't as desperate as before. Nevertheless, they were still struggling to stop him. He was like a juggernaut. I have an idea, but I don't know if it will work, said Todoroki, as he created yet another gigantic wall of ice to stop Makia's attacks at Gaara. What is it? Asked Cementos as he raised an enormous fist out of concrete to punch Gigantomachia in the back of his head.
Gaara, do you have enough sand to cover his entire body? Asked Todoroki while using the fire half of his quirk to fly away, just barely avoiding Makia's large punch.
Maybe. But it will take me some time to gather that much sand.
What's on your mind, Shoto? Asked Tokiyami as he ordered Dark Shadow to coil around Makia's legs, immobilizing him for a few moments. Once Gaara covers him with his sand, I'll fire my prominence burn.
You're going to turn his sand into glass, said Cementos in realization.
Yes. Then, you, Cemento-sensei, will use your concrete to trap him from head to toe too. That should buy us enough time to go over to All Might and Midoriya's side and help them out against Nomu.
Let's do it, said Gaara.
I'll buy you as much time as I can, Tokiyami said before shouting the name of his special move, Dark Shadow, Full Nelson.
Luckily, Kaminari and Kirishima weren't there to make fun of his special move's name again. But Tokoyami wasn't allowed the leisure to think of random thoughts for long because Dark Shadow warned him mere moments after catching Makia in a full Nelson hole.
He's too strong. I can't keep him for long. An enormous amount of concrete came out of the ground and trapped Makia's legs, rising up his torso and almost encasing Dark Shadow within two.
Tokoyami-kun! Pull back your Dark Shadow! Shouted Cementos before willing his quirk to encase Makia's entire body in concrete. It didn't hold him for long before cracks appeared, and Gigantomachia broke free. Cementos panicked when the giant took a big step towards him and raised his enormous foot to stomp him to death. But Todoroki quickly covered the ground in slippery ice, and Makia lost his balance, falling for the third time that day. A roar of rage came from the giant as he started rising to his feet.
It's done. I finally got enough sand, Gaara announced.
He was sweaty and pale, exhausted from the effort he had made to turn the surrounding soil into sand with his quirk.
Sand waterfall. The ground trembled as an enormous wave of sand erupted into the air and smashed into Gigantomachia like a tsunami. Clenching his right hand into a fist, Gaara shouted with the last of his strength. Sand binding prison. 10 enormous hands with beast-like claws came from the wave of sand and smashed together into Makia, burying him within. Having been waiting for the perfect moment, Todoroki's entire body was set ablaze, making him appear like a miniature sun. Proeminence burn. A blinding beam of fire burst from his body like a laser cannon, engulfing the enormous statue of sand in a sea of flames. Tokiyami's Dark Shadow grabbed the weakened Gaara in his arms, and they ran away, putting some distance between them and Todoroki's all-out attack, lest they be burned to death.
The large amount of sand covering Makia started to melt, turning into glass under the heat of the flames that were comparable to the sun.
Last, but not least, Cementos put his hands on the ground and poured his entire strength into one last move. A colossal amount of cement rose from the ground and covered the giant, creating an enormous pyramid almost 2 times taller than him, cooling the liquid glass and trapping Makia within. To put the figurative nail in the coffin, Todoroki strained himself to cast a variation of his heaven-piercing ice wall one more time, covering the large pyramid of concrete with a thick layer of ice.
"We did it!" Todoroki said with a faint voice as he landed on the ground, panting in exertion.
"Take your time to recover," said Cementos. "I'm going to All Might and Midoriya Izuku's side right away."
But, at that very moment, Izuku's agonizing scream reached their ears. "All Might? No. Shiyu a few minutes earlier. All Might. The students and non-combat teachers have evacuated. All the flying-type villains have been defeated too. I'm here to support you."
At the sound of that voice, All Might smiled as he turned to look at the top of the UA barrier. "Great job, Eraserhead," he said in excitement, giving him a big smile and a thumbs up. Now that Aizawa, with his erasure quirk, was on their side, between him and Izuku, they were going to make quick work of the 3 remaining high-end Nomu. "Aizawa-sensei, focus on the Nomu with the helmet. He has a dangerous spatial distortion attack and a sort of heat vision quirk too. We have to kill him first. I will nuke him."
"Don't worry, I'm going to erase the quirks of all 3 of them," said Aizawa.
"I'll take on the fat and the elephant Nomus and keep them busy," All Might shouted and threw himself at the fat Nomu. "Detroit Smash," he screamed. He was confident that without their shock absorption and super regeneration quirks, the Nomu wouldn't be able to withstand even 2 of his smash attacks.
However, right as his fist was about to collide with Fat Namu's head, All Might's muscular form disappeared, and he transformed into a man as skinny as a skeleton. What the...
Momentarily, his brain couldn't process the unexpected turn of events. He had been reaching the limits of his muscle form, true, but, according to his calculations, he should have still had at least 10 or 15 minutes left. It made no sense for his strength to disappear just like that.
Unless Aizawa used his erasure on me. But why?
Why would he?
All those thoughts passed through his mind in the span of a second. But he didn't have the time to come to a satisfactory conclusion to help him understand the situation, because a huge mouth appeared in the belly of the fat Namu, and his large white teeth transformed into steel before he chomped on All Might's frail body.
"All Might, no!" screamed Izuku in a hoarse voice. He tried to use his float and his super speed to rush at All Might, but he realized, to his horror, that his quirks weren't responding to his will either. Overcome with shock, Izuku was frozen in disbelief when it dawned on him what had just transpired.
Aizawa-sensei betrayed us. How could Aizawa of all people side with the villains? Izuku had watched the footage from the USJ incident many times before. Eraserhead had fought bravely against dozens of villains, and put his life on the line to protect his students. Why? How is this possible? It didn't make any sense. While Izuku was frozen in stupefaction and basically turned into a quirkless person, the laser Namu's eyes glowed, and a beam of light shot at him.
At the very last moment, a kunai with a ninja wire tied to its pommel ring wrapped around Izuku's healthy arm and yanked him to the side. The laser Nomu's laser beams missed the boy only by a breath, carving a deep pair of lines into the UA barrier.
"Izuku, wake up!" shouted Naruto in hopes of bringing him back to his senses.
After hearing Izuku's heart-wrenching cry, Naruto left Shigaraki Nomu and the female high-end Nomu behind and rushed to him, worried for his safety. The blonde wasn't unaffected by what he had witnessed either, but it was far from the first time he had seen someone die. He managed to keep his wits to himself and even save Izuku before the laser Nomu's heat beams could kill him. At that moment, the elephant Nomu threw his enormous trunk at them, and the fat Nomu also enlarged his 2 arms to a huge size before smashing them down on the 2 boys like a pair of gigantic hammers. Naruto's shout had made Izuku come back to his senses, but seeing the two Nomu's huge limbs coming at them, despair came over him. With Aizawa erasing their quirks, they were finished.
You shouldn't have come here, he tried to say, feeling regret at the fact that he had dragged Naruto to die together with him. But as Izuku started wallowing in despair, 4 chains came out of Naruto's back and formed a dome of golden light around them.
Izuku's tear-filled eyes widened in disbelief.
How? Aizawa-sensei's erasure doesn't work on my chains, explained Naruto, all the while not even flinching as the 2 high-end Namu's attacks slammed into the dome of light created by his adamantine sealing chain. As they were speaking, Namu Shigaraki and female Namu arrived on their side of the battlefield too. But Naruto didn't even spare them a second glance.
You should be able to use your quirks now, right?
Naruto's mastery over his adamantine sealing chains was exquisite enough to allow him to control whether he cancelled someone's quirk or not. Izuku tested his conjecture by conjuring his black whip. Yeah. Don't panic, said Naruto calmly. I am here.
Izuku's eyes filled with tears anew when he heard that saying. It made him think of All Might, who was now lying on the ground dead, half of his body missing.
Izuku, listen to me, Naruto said in a strong voice to make his mind stay in the present. All Might is dead. But you are still alive, and All Might wouldn't have wanted to see you follow him to the grave. You have to survive. You have to go back home to your mother, don't you? Don't think about the past. Not now. Focus on the present. Are you with me? At that moment, Izuku was reminded of just how reliable and supportive Naruto used to be in the past, when he had been just a nerdy, quirkless boy. Naruto had taken him under his wing, trained him, and helped him unlock his hysterical strength. Thanks to him, he had managed to enroll at UA High. It was thanks to him that he had taken the first few steps on the path of becoming a pro hero.
They had grown apart over the years, but now Izuku was feeling as if they had gone to the past. Naruto's mere presence calmed him. Seeing how cool and collected he was while there were no less than 5 high-end Nomu attacking the chain dome all around them made Izuku feel that they might actually pull through somehow. It gave him hope.
Izuku wiped the tears on his cheeks with the back of his sleeve, and showed a determined face. What's the plan?
You have a quirk that sort of buffs your attack power, right? Use it, and then prepare the strongest attack that you are capable of. You will count to 5 when you are ready to launch your attack. The moment you say, 5, I'll cancel my chains. You know who to aim for, right? Yes, I'll aim at Aizawa, said Izuku, his voice filled with determination. He wasn't willing to call him Sensei anymore.
You understand that you'll be killing him, right? Naruto asked for confirmation that Izuku wouldn't pull his punches and hold back. I've prepared my heart for it, Izuku said grimly. All Might is dead because of him. I'll never forgive him. All right. Let's do it, said Naruto, nodding his head, satisfied at the look in Izuku's eyes.
Wait, what about you?
What about me? There are 5 high-end Namu outside. Once your chains are gone, you'll be defenseless. Don't worry about me. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me, Izuku shouted. Naruto chuckled at him and actually flicked his forehead with his finger as if he were making fun of a dumber little brother.
As long as you take care of that traitor, nothing will happen to me. I'm strong, Izuku, stronger than you imagine. For the first time, I will reveal my full power. So don't worry, focus on your task. You have to kill Eraserhead, no matter what. You're not saying this just to pacify me, right?
I promise I'm not. You know I don't go back on my word. I can't afford to die here. My mom and dad are waiting for me. I was supposed to spend this weekend together with them and my little sister. Also, Rumi would kill me if I died before we got married.
That last part would have made Izuku laugh if he hadn't been so heartbroken about All Might's brutal death just moments before.
Okay, said Izuku, finally letting go of his worries.
The green-haired boy threw one last glance at All Might's mutilated, lifeless body before pinning his eyes on Shota Aizawa, who was glaring at them from the top of the Ua barrier.
One for all, full cow, 100%.